In this short video, I'm summarizing our Appendix A at the end of our Chapter 1. As you probably learned in a high school civics class, there's 3 different branches of government. And of course, the legislative branch is responsible for creating tax laws. So in the case of federal laws, we're looking at the U.S. Congress. That's divided up into 2 different houses. One is called the House of Representatives, where by law, all taxes have to be, or tax laws have to originate in this house, House of Representatives. And the other house is the Senate. Of course, that's 2 senators per state. And each of the houses has lots of different committees that specialize in certain types of laws. In the case of tax laws for the House of Representatives, the very powerful Ways and Means Committee works on tax laws. And in the case of the Senate, the Finance Committee works on tax laws. So eventually the specific work is finished by these 2 committees and voted upon by each of the 2 houses. And if there's differences between what was passed by the 2 houses, then Congress forms what we call a joint conference committee, where they iron out those differences. And then the specific law called public law is passed by the legislature, which is really updating the existing law of the United States called the United States Code. And one of the chapters in this code is what we work on, the Internal Revenue Code. Okay, so these public laws are passed by our legislature and then sent over to the president under the administrative or executive branch of our government to either approve or veto. And if approved, then it's the president's responsibility to execute, to carry out the laws. Under the president, there's lots of different cabinets or departments, one of which is the United States Treasury. In addition to printing money, one of the responsibilities of the Treasury is to enforce the tax laws. And they do it through a department called the Internal Revenue Service. And what we see from the Internal Revenue Service is lots of tax forms and instructions. But the main thing, or main laws that the IRS publishes is called Rules and Procedures. In the case of the Treasury, it prints out a lot of regulations. Okay, so some of these terms are mentioned in the appendix. In fact, going back here, for the House Ways and Means Committee, Finance Committee, and Joint Committee, they may print out something called reports describing what the intent of the law is. And again, this is the actual law here, passed by Congress and approved by the President, and then enforced by the executive or administrative branch. Okay, so let's say that you file your tax return and you get audited and you disagree with what the IRS says you owe. Well, before you try to take it to court, you would try to appeal within the IRS, either with the auditor's supervisor, or there's a department within the IRS just for appeals. And they take into consideration possibly any costs they would lose if it was appealed to a court. But if you cannot agree with the IRS, and you don't want to pay the tax, then the specific court you would take your case to is called the tax court. To get into the tax court, you do not have to prepay any taxes the IRS says you owe. Okay, so in the tax court, you would bring up your case. Now, if you did pay the tax and file for a refund, and the IRS denies your refund, then another court you can take your case to is called the district court. And if you lose your cases in either of these courts, then you can appeal it to the next level, called the Circuit Court of Appeals. Here in Hawaii, we're in the 9th Circuit of the U.S., the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, which includes also California. there's different circuits for different parts of the U.S., and if they hold differently for the same situation, like maybe the Ninth Circuit holds in favor of the taxpayer and the Eighth Circuit holds in favor of the IRS, then that's a typical type of situation where they appeal to the next level, which is the Supreme Court. Very few cases get to the Supreme Court, and more so very, very few cases, tax cases, get to the Supreme Court level. Okay? So all of the cases mentioned in these courts are then written up as decisions and used as authorities. So we have authorities for case laws, authorities for regulations, rules, and procedures, including forms and instructions by the executive branch. We have the actual law over here, and then committee reports from the legislature, all as tax authorities we can use. So not just what you read in a textbook, but professionals would go to these authorities to determine how they should handle specific tax situations.